Issue Review: Physicians-Assisted Suicide by Sarah Crowe. Immanuel Kant, Deontological Yes. Kant says that persons should treat persons like persons. A person is someone with reason and goodwill. A goodwill is not good because of its effects or accomplishments, and not because of its adequacy to achieve any proposed end. It is good only by virtue of its willing, that is good in itself. Reason is the capacity for consciously making sense of things, applying logic, and establishing and verifying facts, and changing or justifying practices, institutions, and beliefs based on new or existing information. Reason's true vocation must therefore be to produce a will which is good in itself, and not just good as a means to some further end. Kant says every word we argue should be a priori. A priori is a knowledge. All knowledge is innate. We must be able to will that maxim of our actions should become a universal law. Maxim is principle. Universal law refers to the concepts whereby those principles and rules for governing human beings' morals are universal in their acceptability. For rational beings, all stand under the law that each of them should treat himself and all others never merely as a means, but always as sometime as an end in himself. End in itself is something desired or aimed at or valued purely for its sake rather than its means to anything else. Rational beings are persons. A rational being belongs to a kingdom of ends as a member, if while legislating its universal laws, he is also subject to the laws. Kingdom of ends is a systematic union of rational beings under common laws. The practical imperative will therefore be the following: as in such way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in another person, always in the same time as an end, never merely as a means. Physician-assisted suicide is defined as physicians knowingly providing the means to commit suicide to a competent patient who voluntarily makes these requests and then uses these means inadequately to take his own life. A patient has decided that they do not wish to suffer or receive treatment anymore and believes suicide is the only option. Deontological theories of ethics concern themselves with our obligations and duties, irrespective of the effects of our actions. Kant would argue that the person had a duty to themselves to decide that he does not wish to mutilate himself and go out willingly with no pain. He must use the innate traits of reason and goodwill to decide. The physician provides the means to administer the fatal dose, is not mutilating the patient, he is not maiming, corrupting, or killing him, he is treating the person as an end in itself. The man who contemplates suicide will ask himself whether his actions could be compatible with the idea of humanity as an end in itself. If he damages himself in order to escape from the painful situation, he is making use of a person merely as a means to maintain a tolerable state of affairs till the end of his life. Therefore, Kant would argue that physician-assisted suicide is morally permissible because the patient and the physician are treating the person as an end, never merely as a means. John Rawls, Deontological No. As stated in the original position, a person must act in accordance with justice is fairness. The original position is designed to be a fair and impartial point of view that is to be adopted in our reasoning about fundamental principles of justice. Principles of justice consist of two principles. First, each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive scheme of equal basic liberties compatible with the similar scheme of liberties for others. Second, social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so that they are both reasonably accepted to be to everyone's advantage and to attach to positions and offices open to all. Justice, a concept of moral rightness based on ethics, rationality, law, natural law, religion, or equity. It is also the act of being just and or fair. Equality, the state of being equal, especially in status, rights, and opportunities. A person is free, equal, and rational. Justice is fairness conveys the idea that principles of justice and fairness are agreed to in an initial situation that is fair. Physician-assisted suicide is defined as a physician knowingly providing the means to commit suicide to a competent patient who voluntarily makes the request and then uses this means independently to take his own life. We contend that the debate has been confused by a focus on positions ultimately taken and not on the facts, principles, and values that implicitly inform these views. In order to judge whether or not a physician-assisted suicide complies with Bentham's two principles of justice, we have to know whether or not it is equally available to all. Physician-assisted suicide is legal in 6 states. California, Colorado, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington legalize physician-assisted suicide via legislative state. Montana has legal physician-assisted suicide via court ruling. The other 44 states either have laws against it or laws that are not defined. Physician-assisted suicide is not available to all due to the restrictions in place by the government, so that takes away the ability for it to have equal basic liberties for all, and is not able to be used to everyone's advantage. Therefore, Bentham would argue that physician-assisted suicide is not morally permissible based on the two principles of justice. Peter Singer, utilitarian, yes. Humans should act in accordance with the basic principle of equality. Equality is the basic ethical principle, not as an assertion of fact. We must go beyond a personal or sectional point of view and take into account the interest of all those affected unless we have sound ethical grounds for doing otherwise. Interests are desires. This provides us with the basic principle of equality, the principle of equal consideration of interests. If it is in our power to prevent something bad from happening without thereby sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, we ought morally to do it. Without sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance means without causing anything else comparably bad to happen or doing something that is in itself or failing to promote some moral good. Physician-assisted suicide is defined as physicians knowingly providing the means to commit suicide to a competent patient who voluntarily makes the request and then uses these means independently to take his own life. Consequentialism focuses on the consequences of an individual's actions or the implications of broader social policy. In jurisdiction where neither voluntarily euthanizing nor physician-assisted suicide is legal, whether death comes sooner or later for terminally ill patients will often depend on whether or not they require a respiratory, which most physicians will be prepared to withdraw, or it may vary with how ready a physician is to administer life-shortening doses of painkiller. Perhaps risking these being reported to the police by a zealous pro-life nurse, whether we are concerned to maximize liberty or to reduce suffering, we should prefer that the time when death comes depends on the wishes of the mentally competent. The Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, and Oregon now allow the citizens or residents to make that decision. There is no sound reason why other countries and other parts of the United States should not allow their citizens the same freedom. Singer argues that mentally competent patients have the right to decide if they want to commit suicide. By allowing the patient to make these decisions, we are not allowing anything else bad to happen. All affected by this decision will be able to shorten their suffering. The family would now have to watch the patient deteriorate. The patient would cut their suffering and pain short. All patients who have the mental capacity to make this decision for themselves should be allowed the equal right to make it. Because he has argued physician-assisted suicide is in multiple argues, I can say that Peter Singer would argue that it is morally permissible. Jeremy Bentham, utilitarian, no. Morally permissible acts provide the greatest amount of pleasure for the greatest number while preventing the most pain. In order to determine the amount of pleasure or pain, the means to effectively generate such pleasure or pain, a principle for determining utility is required. The principle of utility is constituted of 7 variables of measurement: intensity, duration, certainty, uncertainty, propinquity, remoteness, funcity, purity, and extent. Intensity is measure of degree of extremity, concentration, depth. Duration is a measure of temporal continuance. Certainty is a measure of confidence/probability for or against a predicted event. Propinquity, remoteness, is a measure of the immediacy of an event. Functionality is a measure of the probability that an event will generate fertilize similar pleasurable events. Purity is a measure of the probability that an event will generate fertilize dissimilar painful events. Extent is the measure of an exponential effect of an event's product of fields of individuals with decreasing immediacy. Physician-assisted suicide is defined as physicians knowingly providing the means to commit suicide in a competent patient who will voluntarily make the request and then uses those means independently to take his own life. Consequentialism focuses on consequences of individuals' actions or the implications of broader social policy. And central tenet is the principle of utility, maximizing benefits and minimizing harm. For intensity, Bentham would argue that physician-assisted suicide would allow a person to make a decision that is too extreme to make when they could be in the wrong state of mind. Duration, the patient would possibly cut their pain short, but deciding to commit suicide could have a negative effect on the extent of time those involved mourn. It could also have a negative effect on the physician or those involved in administering the lethal dose if legal action is taken. There could be times when the patient's family member is given the lethal dose to administer by the physician, but the patient did not want it. We also do not know the patient will feel no pain or if the effects will be immediate. There are always possibilities that there could be complications. Bentham would argue that because there are so many questions as to physician-assisted suicide can truly maximize pleasure and minimize pain, physician-assisted suicide is not morally permissible.